Thank you so much for participating and being here. Today we're going to be talking about AI, kind of a hot topic for everybody, and sometimes overused, so we're going to kind of learn from Angie and Paul kind of what's happening, how AI is transforming, and all the different things that are happening in a home. But before that, I want to invite Angie Larson, who is with Savant. Without our sponsors, none of this would actually be able to happen, so we're very grateful for their contributions and their support. And I just want Angie to talk a little bit about Savant.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. We think that what's happening in the smart home today is just a complete evolution and revolution. You know, Paul and I will talk about what it means to have some of these things be part of the intelligence of the home, right? And so, you know, we're just very excited to be able to banter together and have some great discussion on what does it mean to look at having a holistic operating system for the home, right? Why should you be looking at that? Why is that something important as you look at all the different elements of the smart home, right? Why are we talking about today in this session responsive automation and AI, and what does that look like, and how is that changing the face of what you think of as traditional control systems and control platforms, and what will that mean for your clients, right? And how we're looking at different elements of the home as smart, right? And that definition of what is smart has changed over time, right? And so I think all of these kinds of things weave together as we think about what is the smart home. So happy to be sponsoring and be able to talk here and
Great. Well, thank you.
kick it off.
So just to introduce myself, my name is Tara Pavia. I work for a master builder in New England, Kenneth Bona and Son Construction. And I also worked for an integrator for a long time. So I love marrying these two subjects together and seeing the synergy and the perspective of the builder side and what your needs are, and also what the integrator can provide. And this topic is a fun topic, AI. Everyone's kind of aware of it now in very different ways. Recently, I went and saw a panel discussion with a landscape architect and builder, and we had slides and we had paddles, AI or real, AI or real. And so they were showing landscape designs, and everyone's like, real? And they're like, no, it's AI. And they were showing homes that looked dimensional and perfect, AI. And it is a great resource for builders, architects, and designers, because it helps kind of give your client a perspective of where you're heading, what you're looking at, materials, or if there's a color scheme for a designer, or a landscape architect wants to remove a shrub, or whatever flowers they may need, it's like instantaneously. So with AI, the good news is that AI is not going to replace anyone's job in this room, but it is quickly growing and able to assist us in a positive way many times. And that's why we're here today. We're going to hear about AI and luxury tech home. What we used to know is just voice activated, and now what's happening overall with it. And I actually you got to hear about Angie, and I just want to give Paul Wilson from NICE an opportunity to introduce himself.
Yep, my name's Paul Williams. I'm the managing director globally for the home management business unit at NICE. And home management business unit is everything to do with smart home, security, and access control. And my teams worldwide are looking at where the next technologies are coming from and going, managing the roadmap, and then also managing worldwide sales as well. So that's my group.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, I'm going to let you both start with
Okay, yeah, well, we'll kick it off. I think you gave us a challenge. We'll say Tara gave us a big challenge when Paul and I connected with Tara a couple weeks ago to say, well, what should we talk about with AI? Like what, that we could talk about anything. We could talk about business tools in your businesses. We could really take deep, dark holes here of what could we really approach. And I think we sort of settled in on splitting this discussion into a couple of different areas that we'll just kind of back and forth on, right? One is, how does the idea of AI or the experiences that AI have to offer change what we think of as traditional user interfaces? right? And that ugly word, user interface, is kind of a term, right, that we use in our industry, which means, right, how the homeowner is using their home and how does this change that. So I think that's one of the pieces Paul and I kind of honed in on and say, okay, what does that mean and what do those changes look like? And the second is then how does it enhance the experience, right? So it's great that it changes things and we can talk product and we can go into deep, dark technical holes, but then lifting ourselves out, right? What does it mean for the client and, how does that change their experience? So that's kind of what you challenged us to chat about.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of the two topics we have.
Absolutely.
That good?
Perfect.
All right.
Good setup. I like it.
All right. All right. So let's chat about that and look at what does that mean to kind of modernize the smart home interface. So I don't know, Paul, maybe you want to kick us off with some of the things NICE is doing, and I'll talk about some Savant
we
stuff.
just had a recent release. We announced it at the CEDIA show in September in Denver. And one of the things that we've done is that word user interface. Is that the way that the industry is run, for the most part, has been very much, the personalization's been there, but it's been ubiquitous across a family atmosphere. So if I program a touch panel or an on-screen interface, that interface now needs to be used by everybody in the house. It's just kind of the way it's worked. What we announced was this ability for us to be able to use facial recognition, also using Bluetooth radios within your cell phone if you're carrying it around with you, or mobile phone. To be able to have that user interface change for the people. And so as the person in the home, as one of the family members walks up to the screen, they can have their own user interface that is really only the things that they're interested in. Their playlists, their lighting scenes, the things that are important to them. Somebody else in the family walks up to the touch screen, it changes instantaneously. It's actually really fast. And now I get a different user interface, can look completely different, in fact, can be styled different, can look different. So that it's very personalized based on the people that are in the house. And that's a different way of thinking about this home, because the thing that we've done as an industry, we've tried to throw everything we can into these systems, and you get these places where you're like, I've got 9 different keystrokes to get into the thing I really want. Well, we can elevate those things out now and bring them into a more personalized manner for the consumer.
I love that. A lot of times, like years past, you had to know someone's password, right? And like, what's Dad's password? Or did Mom change it? And how do I get in? And it's amazing now, this recognition, and you can bypass all those obstacles.
Yeah, it also lets you lock things out there, things that you don't want the children in the family to adjust, like temperature and other things, right? Cameras.
Love it.
Yeah, that's a cool use of, well, a couple things, like in my commentary, right? First, it's a cool use of the evolving camera technology that exists, right? And so you think about evolving camera technology at the entryway or outdoor security, but applying that into that user experience inside the house, I think is a fun way to think about AI and personalization, because we're all striving for that homeowner, that end user, to feel like they have a connection to what they're looking at. Like, really, that emotional connection is super important to what I'm looking at versus, some thing that I didn't make, or I'm not interested in, or somebody made on my behalf. I don't know what it does. So I think that is a really cool way to use that.
Yeah.
On the Savant side, when we think about what it looks like to modernize that user interface, I think we're also leaning into different user interfaces that you might not expect, right? It's really expected, I think, to come up to a keypad or a touch panel or something like that and want to control something. I think those are cool ways. But what are other things that you can do? And I think that the industry has leaned in hard for several years on voice, and voice keeps, shall I say, getting better.
Yes.
Right? And we use really complex words like natural language recognition, right? Do we like that one?
Yeah, it's used a lot now.
So we use complicated words to describe simple things. But voice, I think, in general, is getting better as we think about that as a user interface. I think that's cool. But there are also just other things that you don't expect to be a user interface. So, I had explained to a group this morning, right, that Savant is quite Apple-centric, so we can lean in hard to things like Apple CarPlay or NFC tagging or other things that can create a response inside the home, right? And how to do that. So, the car comes into some geofence location of the home. Should the home be responsive to that, right? Should it matter whose car it is? Should it matter who's driving it, right? Those are all the kinds of decisions, like Paul's saying, that we can make to be more responsive to the people that live inside of the home.
Yeah.
So I think that's other way to think about AI.
I agree, and I think those are I think you bring up a very good point, is those user interfaces are changing. Not only voice, but also the experience of having facial recognition and the other things that are going along with it. It's changing the dynamic of how people interact with their homes. But it all boils down to simplicity too. It's how do we make it so simple that the consumer's not overburdened by the technology, but the technology works for them in their home. And I think that's what we're ultimately all trying to achieve at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the cars, though, we actually had a client, we did license plate recognition. So they would know the license plate, and that's how they would know who can come in and who can't. So,
For security.
for security.
Yeah, very cool application,
Yeah.
right? For those kinds of things. So I think, this is some of what we have talked about, but I think you can also dig deep into other types of user interfaces you may not even think of, like how many people's watch or phone or whatever knows that you're asleep or knows that you've woken up, right? These are all things that we're starting to give intelligence to, right? Whether we're in wearables or maybe we're bringing weather information into our homes through touch panels or through phones or through whatever, however we're bringing that information in. You talked a little bit about like sleep-wake cycles, right? Or, is an alarm coming because I know that there's an appointment coming? Can the home be responsive to those kinds of actions, right? Just setting the stage for the right atmosphere for those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Did you say yesterday someone said, or was it Joanne that said, the ultimate luxury was not having your alarm go off?
That's right, no, it
Right,
was
that was
brought up.
luxury living,
Right,
right? That came up yesterday, right? So what does that mean for us to be responsive to understanding that?
The gentle wake up, the shades going up, soft music starting, radiant heat started prior, and all the things that make that experience of waking up natural versus alarming.
Well, yeah, and it used to be that in order to do that, that's always been sort of, I don't want to say always, but that's been possible for a long time, but only by setting a scene or a timer or a thing that happens. Now you can start to become responsive to people's calendars and activities and schedules and different kinds of things. So that becomes part of.
Or even the learned behaviors. I've realized that I wake up at this time every day, and the home starts to associate that with my wake up, and now it knows when it needs to wake me up because it's my schedule.
It's your schedule.
It's great.
Right. How many times do we get in the car and it tries to tell you it's going to take you 10 minutes to get home because it realized that that's likely your schedule, that's likely where you're headed, right? And so those are kinds of things that we can begin to incorporate, I think, as you think about AI in the home.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good? So that's,
Very good.
I think that's just how we think about differences of user interfaces and what those can look like. So those are just, I would say sky will become the limit, right? As things get more intelligent, beds,
For sure.
mattresses,
Well,
it's all kinds of things that are intelligent.
And you see it today. There's a lot of technology around sleep.
And
we're seeing that come into play. You see smart mattresses now. You're seeing smart devices within the bedroom space that allow us to be able to understand what's happening with the sleep of an individual and then be able to affect that and to be able to make some changes, which I think is also great to finally see those kind of things moving into those things that are really going to value, consumers are really going to value.
Yeah. I appreciated our last discussion that the lighting in alarm and dialing 911, that the outside lighting would flash so that the neighborhood and people could, contribute to an emergency if they had to, and that people would know where the home is, where to go. But these are all things that are kind of like weren't available before, so I thought that was a nice
Oh yeah, and I think there's an aging discussion to be had here.
For sure.
There's lots of different examples of how we could apply this type of technology into our awareness and understanding. Because the first day somebody moves into a home is not its last day, as you all know, right? And so how do we evolve to match that lifestyle? I think AI will help us with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
We talked a lot about elder care and family members coming to age in home, and sundowning is sometimes a problem with confusion. And ironically, it's not dimming the lights. You put the lights brighter in their environment so that because that time of day is when they were going home to make dinner or coming home from work. And it was a productive hour during when the sun goes down. And so if you create an atmosphere that's bright, they feel calmer because they think their responsibilities aren't like waking them up with, dimmed lights and feeling as though they're not being productive. There's something more they need to do.
That's very cool. Very cool. All right, so let's talk about kind of our second topic, which I think we've kind of weaved into this discussion a little bit in terms of how do we enhance the experience, right? If we've got all these different types of inputs and user interfaces, what does that mean, and how can we deliver something that just makes everybody feel a little more connected?
Yeah, so it's a great question. One of the things that we've been looking at quite a bit, and I've looked at for over a decade, is that ultimately, and I say this, and we have some integrators in the room. We know who you are, by the way. But one of the things that I say is over the last 40 years that smart home's been around for a long time, and many of you realize that, but it's been around for over 40 years. But really what we've done up to date, for the most part, has been control. And what I mean by that is I have a touch screen, I have a push button, I have a motion sensor, I've got a door window contact that open up, and we do conditional programming. This thing happens, so this then occurs when that happens. Time of day, time of year, all those things are things, but it's cause and effect kind of programming. We're finally getting to the place where AI, and really from some technologies to understand what's going on in the house, we can start to learn the behaviors of the people who live in the house. And the challenge, there's a couple of challenges. The first challenge is that day one, when the homeowner steps into their new home that the builders have built for them and the integrators here have done, usually there's a big smiley face. Because you've done your job, you've talked to the consumers about how they want to use that space. You've adjusted, you've personalized it the best you can. You've put some of those conditional programming in place, and it's fantastic. Day 7,000, though, is not so happy. And it's not necessarily like frowny face, but it's more, Yeah, you go into those homes, and I've done that 5 years later, you walk in and they go, well, so what do those buttons do? I don't know, I don't use them anymore. That's not how I use this room anymore. The room use has changed, but you also don't know what you don't know when you walk into a brand new home. You think you're gonna use the room this way,
well, you have really grand visions, Paul.
You do.
I mean,
this is the other
come
thing,
on.
too. This was gonna be my grand entertainment space, and find out you don't do that much entertaining. But those things change, and the problem is unless the integrator is involved like on a day-to-day, and that's even if the consumers understand that their uses have changed, and that sometimes doesn't happen because it happens over a period of time, that room doesn't really evolve. And I think we're finally starting to get to a place where we can learn what's happening in the space and then adapt it for the consumer. And rather than just having it automatically happen, because we also found early in this sphere of smart home, consumers also don't want to go into a home and have things happen that they don't know why they're happening. That's just as disconcerting as not being able to make it happen. But we're finally getting to a place where we can understand who is in a space without actually having to have inside cameras in the house. We understand that it is Angie that's in the space, it's Tara in the space, it's Paul in the space, and then start to learn what that person is doing in that three-dimensional space, and then start to suggest back to that consumer things they could do to simplify their lives. Whether it's putting the music on the way they like it, adjusting the temperature, adjusting the lighting, blinds up, blinds down, whatever it may be. And we can start to learn those behaviors. And that's where I think the value of what we get into a truly automated and personalized experience for that consumer. And that's where it's going. And I'm excited about that because I think there's a great frontier we're starting to move across here.
Yeah, and I love that idea of something very simple of like, you're watching TV, would you like to close the shades, right? This suggestive behavior, I think, is going to be one that not only will change the face of, I think, the smart home, but I think people are going to expect it, right? And that's the challenge of any of, Paul and I's days and work, is what people start to expect out of their consumer technology, they start to expect from their smart homes, right? Exactly. So, right, my phone's suggesting to me that I should go to bed now, right? So what's my smart home doing, and how should I think about that, I think is a big piece. And I think, Paul, to your point, and I'll just give a couple of examples that we can talk through of what responsive systems can be in the home, right? One of the things that Paul touched on was cameras. Networking is another big key area of that predictive type of behavior, right? Where do you need the most bandwidth? What is happening in the home? How many people are using that bandwidth? What kind of responsive behavior? So I think that idea of learning and adapting can very much apply to network.
And it's a huge problem for most households have a Wi-Fi network, and most households have a Wi-Fi network that sucks. It's just the reality of it. And I think that's where, and the work that you guys have been doing with Juniper and the other folks, I think, are fantastic, because it's that kind of stuff that I believe is going to drive that next wave as well, because at the heart of what we do, it requires connectivity, and it requires a stable and well-running network, and to have those things be more AI driven so it adjusts based on what's happening, I think it's huge. I think there's a big part of what's happening as well.
I think the network awareness really happened during COVID, when people were exhausting everything in the house, from computers to iPads, and everyone was finding that they couldn't either access it, or there were dark spots in the home. So I really do think that the Wi-Fi conversation too, bringing it early and figuring out how they utilize their home, what their expectation, what they'll be doing, and making sure that they have that type of bandwidth.
Yeah, it's huge. And then how is it being used during the day? And that's also the other part of that, is that if you're in a business and you're using a layer 3 managed switch, your IT department decides what traffic and what's going to get priority, and they segment that off and limit bandwidth in there. Most home systems don't do that at all, but they need to start doing that, because you've got kids that are watching 4K YouTube videos, and I'm just trying to get my conference call done.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
They multitask.
Right, and those are going to become big issues. I mean, most people, if you ask them to count how many devices in their home are connected to Wi-Fi, would way underestimate what is connected.
Right.
That would just be, they'd way underestimate that, right? And so this is a big area.
I think it's a huge area.
For thinking about that. So I'd say this is a big area for AI. I think power is another big area for, intelligence, right? As we look at all kinds of different aspects and areas to this, but one is, how do I maximize the energy sources that I have based on, what's coming in? So if my house is running on battery, how am I going to maximize that to great effect? Right. So all kinds of different areas, I think, hit this energy space, and we're only just scratching the surface of what this is going to become. Yeah,
it's interesting. The funny part about it is AI is actually causing a lot of the power problem that we're going to have in North America. Because AI is so consumptive of energy, it's starting to consume a lot of what's being generated. In fact, 3 Mile Island is going to open back up again. Microsoft's taking 100% of that power to supply their AI engines. That's it. Wow. That's it, the whole thing. Right. And we're going to be in a place, and we are today, and then you have the EV mandates and other things that are happening. Smart energy is going to be the only way for you to be able to manage the power in your house is going to be through intelligence, because it's not just a matter of turning the switch on and off anymore. It's understanding when should that switch turn on and off. Right. When's the best part? How much am I storing? What am I storing on site? What am I storing in the community? What can I have reserves for? What am I generating from solar power? All those are factors that are going to be necessary for us to manage going forward, because the energy demand has gone up dramatically, but the production side of it is not matching the consumption part.
I think it's huge, and I think we talk even, again, simplistic examples, right? Today, like a system, you can say, hey, there's a storm coming. I'd like to maximize that battery storage, right? Because I want as much battery as possible when and if that storm hits. That's cool. I mean, that's a great feature. We market that all day long. But wouldn't it be better if that battery was getting intelligence from a weather service or other places of what's happening, right? And just being responsive to that.
Didn't require you to say, put the input in that the smart
exactly,
home. So.
right?
It's proactive.
Being proactive and just handling those things on behalf of the homeowner. So those are all examples, I think, of what you'll start to see,
I agree.
you know, in these places, right? And being responsive. So
Yeah.
that's another area of example. You know, you touched on lighting earlier a little bit, and just general high performance areas of different things that we can do in the AI space. And certainly, like, daylighting has made a huge impact here.
Yes, for sure, and we see it all time and time again. We were talking about it a little bit before it started. It's circadian lighting is one of those terms that gets thrown out a lot, and some people bat their eyes at it and go, well, that doesn't mean anything. But when you actually see it in full usage, and when you've used it yourself, you start to feel the impact. It is meaningful. It is meaningful on the health of the people that are living in that space. And the blinds and shades part of that is also huge, because it plays in two places. One, just for the lighting, but also from an energy perspective. We were just touching on energy. The number one consumption of energy in homes is the HVAC system, which all of you will be very familiar with, having to install a lot of those things. But the reality is, by having blinds and shades, we can save dramatically on energy costs by blocking out the sun in summer months and letting it in winter months to be able to heat and air condition the home, or at least to be able to monitor the temperature a little more easily using the sun or preventing the sun. And so those are things, once again, if I have to think about it as a consumer, I have to, oh yeah, it's sunny today, I'm going to close the blinds. But if that can happen based on weather input, based on actually understanding what's going on with the sun today, I can have the home start to be able to make itself in the mode it needs to conserve energy in the best possible way. And that's where we're headed as well. Already there.
Yeah, I think we're there. We're headed there, and we're there. I mean, you know, both Paul and I, I'm sure, have decked out homes with all kinds of smart stuff in it. And
too much stuff.
Yeah, too much stuff. And people always ask me, what's the most used, or what's the favorite part of your smart home? And I always say the shades.
For sure.
Shades.
Yeah.
Shades, hands down.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think about them.
Nope.
They are not part of any thought I ever have. They're just up when they're supposed to be up. They're down when they're supposed to be down.
They're always where I want them to be, but I never have to do anything about it.
Right.
It's the best part of the system.
Yeah.
You know? So those are some cool things. And I think as we think about different things to do here, you're going to see a lot of this, move in time. And a lot of this is going to be connected, not just to the homeowner and all the different things that we're talking about from an inputs phase and data that we have in, but also, I think, communities, utilities, and other kinds of inputs that are just beginning to take hold of footprints in that neighborhood environment.
I agree. And one other dynamic to that is in the work that you folks are doing, whether you're building a house or whether you're an integrator in the house, the customer service aspect of this as well. Now these systems start to have the intelligence built in, the AI is there. We can start to look for failures within the system and start to identify, maybe and hopefully before the customer even understands they've got a problem. And we can be a lot more reactive as a technology community to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, your blinds and shades, the motor is starting to draw so much power, we're confident your motor's burning out. Let's come in and replace it. Or if you're battery powered, right? Here's a reason for me to do a service trip to go replace the batteries in your blinds and shades. Or even just in the products that are working within the house to understand the HVAC system is now, the compressor is consuming way more energy right now, which is usually a good indication compressor is getting ready to go out. Let's let you know now before you get to a hot day and you're wondering why the house is 100 degrees inside. Let's get it fixed beforehand. So there's these proactive things, I think, that the technology connected to a smart solution using AI, we can do a lot more prediction on what's happening and be able to make a customer experience better from the customer service aspect too.
Love it.
I do love that. And I think as we look at the entire face of businesses that have service models, it'll evolve dramatically. Yeah. And that's.
I guess I have a question now. As far as all this evolving technology and what's happening within your industries, how do you educate your integrators so that they are facing the company and giving their best pitch as to how to utilize this, how user-friendly it is, what it can do, how it's going to work in the future for them, how they'll be trained on it? So that, I guess my question is, how do you keep up your group who's really in front of the customer and selling your product.
I think that is probably, those are probably the challenges, right? As you just did a, yeah, thank you, Tara. No, those are the challenges, right? And not only just educating the integrator, but educating the homeowner. And I think that has been a big educational process. Is most consumers today expect technology to get better after they've purchased it. And when we all think about that, that's a relatively new phenomena, right? That we've been brought to by the likes of Apple and Google and all these different.
My phone continues to get better with every build.
It continues to get better, right? And that's almost unbelievable, right? It didn't used to be that you bought, I don't even know what I could pick on as a technology, but a CD player or whatever that got better. Right? It didn't get better over time, right? When you bought it, that was the latest technology, and then it wasn't, right? But now we even have that experience and expectations from our cars, like from our phones to our cars to any other thing I could say here, right? A streaming service we're subscribed to. We could give a million different examples where the consumer now expects when they go into that experience that it's better than when they bought into it. And that, I think, is a big challenge for us as manufacturers, our integrators in the room, home builders in the room, is that expectation, even if a consumer can't articulate that, that's real, right?
It's a real expectation.
That's a real expectation. Yeah. And so how do we meet up with that and deliver those kinds of, I think, experiences where your smart home or your home continues to be an evolving experience, right? And how do we educate on that? I think it's a great question.
It's a great question. And it is a challenge, as Angie mentioned. The thing we try to do is try to get as frequently in front of our dealers as possible. They're busy. Our integrators are very busy. They've got things that they're doing. We try to get in front of them as much as possible, do webinars, trade shows, every opportunity we get a chance to get in front of them. To bring them into the fold. Marketing information gets sent out to them, let them know what's going on. But it's a constant challenge to keep up because it is moving very rapidly at the same time too. Yeah. And so we do everything we can to try to educate and help them be more educated about what's going on.
Yeah, and I think Savant's doing, what you can look at it two different sides of the fence, right? You can say it's great, it's fantastic, or you can look at it and go, wow, this is, a really hard thing to manage. But you're going to start to see, I think, more and more common things like smart home subscriptions, right? Because that's going to ensure that the home continues to better itself, or that the integrator continues to put that on a path to better itself.
And it is a marketing opportunity for integrators and builders if whatever their service plans are, and if people buy into these service plans, it's part of maintaining and also upgrades or just being available for those questions. A lot of the systems too are so intuitive. They get the ping before the customer does, like if their Wi-Fi's down or whatever it may be, so that it's fixed and it's seamless and the client doesn't know anything's happening. But you never want it to be that, well, my lights aren't working. That darn builder, it has, you really want to separate it, that it is the integrator's responsibility to be a part of that service.
I agree 100%. It's one of the things I know that most builders I talk to, they don't want that long-term technology commitment.
Right. No.
Right. They don't want to have the customer calling them every time there's something that goes bad. Next time I want to hear from you is when you buy your new home, right?
Yes.
So that's the next time. And I think that's one of the dynamics that we as manufacturers, working with our integrators, to be able to put them in a position to be able to provide that type of service, so that that's the go-to people that the homeowner is now going to for that service. But there is a program in place so that the customer and the consumer feels like they are supported and they are supported. But the builder can step away knowing that it's covered. Yeah. I don't need to worry about it.
Absolutely. Because they tend to call the builder because of that relationship. You build such an incredible relationship with them and trust.
It's a challenge. Yeah.
That they're like, hey, this isn't working, and it's kind of how to kind of bring them into the right area.
And I know that's been one of the things that's actually made builders kind of shy away from putting a lot of technology in them, because they're worried about that long-term commitment that goes along with that. And that's what we as an industry are working hard at, is to try to make sure that that dealer and that integrator relationship with the consumer is so strong, and it's backed up by the manufacturers, that the builder can truly feel like they can step away from it and leave it in good hands.
And I do think don't shy away from, and I think you said it really well, but I'll say it like a little deeper there,
Yeah.
right? Don't shy away from that idea of long-term service and support. And so when your client says, I'm not gonna pay another subscription in my smart home or whatever, think about what that means and how to explain to them that they want their home to continue to evolve, just like the other technology in their lives, right? Next time they start their Tesla, right? Did it get better with a software update? Absolutely it did, right? And those are things that, we just have to make sure our education across the board as to what that means. So I think that's a comment there.
Yeah.
Let me look at what I call cross-platform activities or actions, right? And we touched on this a little bit, but you're starting to see other devices be able to be inputs into the smart home, right? So it doesn't have to be a thing that, Savant sold the customer isn't the only input into their system, right? It can be other things like, this new button on all of our phones that's super annoying to me because I keep trying to take a picture and it's in the wrong spot. All those different things can become inputs into the system, and I think that cross-platforming of bringing camera technology or technology from a different device is going to be big into the smart home space.
Yeah, 100%. And the information that those devices bring in as well that can be consumed and then be able to be cross-tabulated with the AI to be able to understand what's happening. Big part of that.
And I think it's true. I think your customer service comment was also really true, is a lot of times, and I know Paul and I both run customer service teams, right? We get calls and people expect us to already know the status of the home, right? Well, I'm calling you and I assume you already know my problem. Now just tell me how to fix it, right? That's a big challenge for us on the side, because people have such demand data from cloud. I mean, hey, we all expect that. I know I expect it if I call, I don't know, a bank or financial institution or somebody I've ordered a product from. I think they should know who I am, what I did before I'm even on the engagement with them, right? And so those are big challenges, and for your business as well as ours, right? They're going to expect, and whether you're an integrator in the room, manufacturer, whatever, that level of customer service expectation is very high.
And it's never fast enough, One of my favorite things when I went into integration, you learn about the hierarchy needs. It used to be, food and water, but the top is really Wi-Fi. Like, if you don't have it, what do we do, right?
So Maslow's priority of needs has changed. So
yeah, exactly. Shelter, food and water. You got Wi-Fi, you're good. So we want things working all the time quickly. Our patient level is actually diminishing because of that. Quick.
Oh, I think so.
You see that timer right on the. You're just like, what?
Why is there a timer?
Yeah. So, anything else to add? Do you think we're ready for questions, or?
I think we can take questions.
Questions be good.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of comments about telephones and automobiles and how things are changing and how it's also cool, but we've been trained lately to think of those as being consumables or disposables. So something new comes out with the phone, get a new phone. Something new comes out with a vehicle, get rid of the old vehicle, get a new one. We don't have that luxury with the home. So how is the industry going to help us prepare for that? I remember coming to these summits several years ago, and future-proofing was a big thing. Haven't heard that for a long time. I think things are happening too quickly, but how do we make sure the industry sets us up for that?
Well, I think it's a great comment on the technology side as you think about the difference in your hardware versus the software of those devices, right? And I know that I got a new phone, 6 weeks ago, and all I did was set the old one next to the new one, and all of my data transitioned, right? So the actual piece of hardware was of no consequence to me from a consumable standpoint, right? So that because what followed me is that data footprint that came with me. And it's funny because like we almost expected that to happen, right? Like I almost expected that to be so painless, right? That I think becomes a big part of how we are having to be responsive to these homeowners, and how we future-proof is to understand that footprint over time.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing that we look at, and the industry as well is looking at, is that there are certain products that you just expect that it's like your HVAC system. It's going to get 15 years of usage out of it, and we need to kind of be thinking in that methodology. Things like lighting control. I don't expect that I'm going to have to swap out every lighting control in my house every 2 years. That'd be a nightmare, right? But I expect it's going to work over some period of time. So as we look at those products and those solutions, we look at what can we do to make sure that we're, I won't use future-proofing, that they're as upgradable as we possibly can to be able to get a long life out of it. But there are other products that we know that have probably 5-6 years of life in them, and we're going to have to upgrade them because the technology is going to change, especially with processors in particular. That the software we're trying to run on these products are going to require bigger and stronger processors, more memory. And that's always that curve that's always happening with processors. And so we think about that kind of in two different methodologies. Maybe not as disposable as a mobile device or as a phone, but certainly thinking about something that needs to be swapped out at some frequency that's going to be longer than, not as long as the life of the home for sure. But there's some frequency that needs to change there. And we tend to think of some of the infrastructure parts of the home that they need to be like any other part of the infrastructure that's there and needs to have longevity. So we think about that upgradable path that's there. And we try to stay within those windows. Not always the case. Sometimes we have to make a leap and go, okay, well, this is the next generation, and that stuff's going to continue to work. But if you want the new stuff, you've got to buy a next generation of products. And we try not to make those leaps, but unfortunately, sometimes we have to do that.
But I think it is our role to take that information and insight with us, right? Because that's what the consumer really wants, is they want to understand that all of the lighting scenes, as Paul gave that example, or the work that I've already put into this system, does any of that go away just because I had to replace the switch, right? Should not. Those are the kinds of conversations that you should be thinking about and having. And hey, this industry has evolved a lot. I mean, I remember like a time where if you had to replace a piece of hardware, it was a reprogramming event, right? And you like started over and you said, oh, now we've got to make this big change, and I actually need to pay somebody who makes a couple $100 an hour to go in and make these kinds of device changes. And I think those are parts of the pieces we have to think about as well. As you're going to have hardware, swap overs, but making sure that is
seamless and easy.
And easy, I think, is a big piece of what we can do. And I think we've started to see that. At least I hope the integrators in the room are going to head nod to starting to make that easier and easier and easier instead of a complete redo event.
And to Paul's point, smart technology has been around for 40 years, as a lot of technology has, and some of the older demographic who's doing their third or fourth home, oh, I had that system 20 years ago, I couldn't stand it, it was a pain in the neck, I don't want it. And you'll get that kind of mentality because they're not as exposed or experienced and as technically savvy as some of your younger clients who are building homes, and they're used to upgrading their car. They know their phone's going to be replaced, and they understand their home is not going to age without replacements updates. They're of that mindset because this is the world they live in. It is harder to get some older demographics to latch on, but because it is so easy to use, the need of it is almost more so with sometimes the older population because it is just a button. It's not 100 apps. It's not passwords and 100 characters to remember. So once they get through that kind of moment of that old system they hated, they really could have the luxury of having ease of use and less maintenance.
Really good point. Yeah.
I also think one of your challenges is with that younger generation too is also I can do that myself.
A
I got
lot.
this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I got this. I actually don't need all that, right? Because I can buy some smart this or some technology this, and I don't actually need all that. And then what you find is you start, and I can't remember, somebody told me their rule of thumb is like, I don't know, more than 3. But once you start stacking, well, now I have smart doorbell, and I have some smart lighting, and now I want to have HVAC control, and this is a bummer that now I have all this different disparate experiences. That's where the younger generation can understand the value of
Professional
Yeah, what the difference.
Yep.
Right. Because on its own, those things are all great, right? They're fantastic
absolutely.
individually, right?
Want to get them to interoperate, want them to develop a full experience for the consumer, especially this is the luxury experience here. It's near to impossible to do on your own. So.
Right, and I've heard a fair amount of integrators say that's actually much harder for us to service and support as well, right? And so, hey, it actually is easier for an integrator, again, I'm speaking for them, but easier to service and support a whole holistic platform, right, that they're able to update and service versus a bunch of disparate things.
And even the tech savvy, I mean, a lot of our clients created an app, right? Sold it, and they have multi-millions, and now they're having this tech savvy home, and they say, I can do it, I know what I'm doing. And it becomes, later they end up calling saying, I have all these things, it's not quite speaking to the other thing, because they think they may know. It's like building a house for a subcontractor. I always say, they think they can manage the entire project, but then they come upon things that they really don't know and need the assistance of, a greater power, so.
And that's why integrators are so valuable in this industry for what they bring to the table and having that positive customer experience, making it easier for builders at the end of the day too.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hey guys, thanks for all the insight on this, and I just want to address his question real quick about how these things continue to get better. I can speak for myself as an integrator. Both of these guys do a fantastic job of doing software-based improvements. So it is pretty simple to allow that technology to improve. So really it's a software improvement thing. But my question to you guys on behalf of our builder community is, what kind of critical infrastructure is necessary for all of this AI technology? Because I think everybody's excited about it and they want it, but when it's time to put it in, what kind of critical infrastructure is it? Is it simply a more robust network, or is there other parts of the infrastructure that we need to take a look at?
So I'll start. First part is you mentioned it, and we mentioned at the very beginning, all of these solutions require a stable running network. And these systems today that are getting installed look more like small business than they do residential systems of old. And so networking is incredibly important because you've got to be able to get data, you've got to be able to move it around. So that's a critical part of what's happening there. I would say that wireless technology has come along enough that everyone was pulling wire to every room of the house for a long time. Multiple wires. You got 6s run into a room, and I would say we're kind of moving past that at this point. Wi-Fi's got to a place, and Wi-Fi 6 and all the other things are happening. Are getting a place where we can reliably service with a robust network. You can support those things wirelessly. There are things you're always going to want wired, and integrators will always want wired because it's just easier to make sure it's there, and I would always suggest that's the case. But outside of the network, there are other infrastructure parts that will come to bear. We're taking the approach. We want to do as much. I'll speak for NICE. We want to do as much processing on premise as possible. That's from two perspectives. One, from reliability. If you rely on the cloud 100%, there's always that chance the cloud's not there for you when you need it. So we want to do as much as we can on premise. And so we're developing that kind of processor network to understand what we need to do on site. There is, because of the amount of data that you're generating, there will be some cloud, and there always will be some cloud element that's part of that. So a stable internet connection is also a necessity that's there and will be there for probably all future. So we need that, and also some of the complex AI calculations that are done are best in the cloud rather than locally, but we're trying to do as much locally as we can. So we'll be generating new products that will come into the market to be able to process that there. Then there's the subsidiary parts of that, which are then all these inputs into the AI system, whether it's sensors, whether it's interfaces. Those are always going to be necessary to bring into that and to build out that AI sensing networks, because you've got to have data in order to then calculate the AI of what you need to do, and that data is generated by those interactions. So from my perspective, that's a lot of what we're focused in on.
Yeah, and I do think it's a really important topic that even infrastructure systems are getting smarter, right? As we even think about, right, certainly from my perspective, when we think about power, right, certain things are things that we didn't even expect to get smart are getting smarter, right? And so what is that critical infrastructure, right? And so I think, Paul, like, hands down, is going to be your network, right? And that's separate from the internet connection, which you said, Paul, right? That's the homeowner's biggest, challenge. Also, as those two things are different from each other, right? And that type of critical infrastructure, and I think what you're doing to make the smart power, lighting, HVAC, that to me is the critical infrastructure. And when you move into a home, those are pieces you expect to last for decades, right? You're not expecting those pieces to go through. So like you said, hey, yeah, I'm going to expect to replace my car, my phone, or my this or my that, but I'm not expecting to replace the lighting control infrastructure, the HVAC infrastructure, the breaker, smart panel infrastructure. Those are things I'm expecting are going to,
Have longevity.
Right? The motors and the shades, those are things I'm expecting to have longevity. I think those are the things that we should, be thinking about from a critical infrastructure standpoint, and really working with builders and homeowners. We talked yesterday a little bit about just technology assessments and, what kinds of things are you thinking about for the home, right? Other stuff can get replaced, remote controls and touch panels and that kind of stuff.
Any other questions? Or even experiences, even if they're not good experiences, we have thick skin up here. It's like working through those experiences so we can have a resolve it helps us be better at what we do. Any shares? No?
It's a bit of a share, but like 30 years of doing this business as an integrator, we're transitioning from being a technology contractor into more of a service provider. So it's much more of a service provider model that happens to be able to do technology contracting, and it's just the nature of what you guys are talking about, the internet connected things. You go to sleep with the black Buick in the garage and wake up and it's a big Cadillac just because Apple thought it would be a good idea to do an improvement overnight. And all of a sudden this ecosystem, this organism that we installed doesn't work. So I see as an integrator, our model is shifting from what I used to do, selling a VCR, and the only reason why it broke is a kid put a Pop-Tart in it. And now we're dealing with these organisms, and we're watching also the life cycle, as you guys were talking about, certain perceptions of life cycles of how long equipment should last. We're watching, innovations occur like, as early as like 9 months, for sure. Every CEDIA, there's some new change, and so 9 months to 2 years, and it's just that's I guess my comment is just watching the transition in our industry. I think there's also a benefit to builders to understand that the integrator being able to be the enduring service provider to navigate and support that client through all the years of that house, and just being the advocate. In some of the other panels, there were all these other talks about different technologies that I was more new to around, the wellness and more air conditioning. I forget the Green Heck was talking about their products and such. It was fascinating to understand that the advocacy of an integrator to support clients through this change. I'm also watching just exponentially change. I'm fascinated to see what happens then with AI coming up here and how it will continue to kind of transition the exponential change of our industry. But again, I think I just wanted to make the comment that we're here for builders as integrators to support their customers into the future to have an enjoyable experience in their home. And I think our touch is broadening too on what we can support them with.
Yeah, I think it's a great comment, because you're also experiencing, I think, I don't want to say for the first time, because I don't sit in your shoes. You all sit in your shoes and you know what you're dealing with. But there's rapid evolution out there externally. So whether that's code compliance or what, utility changes and what's happening, in across energy spaces and other things, that stuff is happening so quickly, right, that it's even a challenge to get our hands around it, right? There's like, wow, okay, we thought we would need this and it would have to be at this price point, and now we need this and it can be at this price point, and now we can make an adjustment over here. This is changing so rapidly as coming into your space, and I think I liken it to what happened in the lighting space. Like, lights and fixtures were the same for like 100 years. Like, I don't even know. Like, you turned them on, you turned them off. Maybe you dimmed them, and maybe you didn't, because maybe they
Mostly
flickered.
didn't.
Yeah, maybe they flickered a bunch, and it was annoying to dim them. I don't know. That was the same way for decades, right? And in years, and suddenly we went through this rapid change of not only, tunables and all that feature stuff, but even on the infrastructure side. Oh, this is low voltage, and now I need a driver space, and where am I going to put that on the wall? And oh, that enclosure doesn't match this, and how am I going to deal with all this from an infrastructure side? I think you're seeing that come in today from all other kinds of inputs, from utilities and other people that are making regulation and other changes in the home, right? And so you're going to see that continue to evolve. What do I do when I built my dream home with gas appliances and now I have to go and update them with electric ones? That means that's a lot bigger than you think, right? And so, what does that mean? Do I even have the service size to support such an upgrade in this home, right? And how can technology companies like Paul and I support that in as best a way possible? Because those inputs are new. That's a new concept that I think is having to be dealt with by the integrator, and in unexpected ways. People don't expect, that they go to buy a luxury appliance, they upgrade their stove, they get through that process, they're all excited, and then they don't realize they don't even have an electrical service size to support that. So the $7,000 stove became a whole lot more expensive than that, right? And so what does that look like, and how can we future-proof that, or at least make that less cumbersome? I think it's going to be part of what we deal with. Yeah.
Another thing on the AI for the integrator's life and what will change there, I look at that as a benefit as well, what we've talked about. And one of the other problems that occurs is that even when I talk about control, it's actually amazing when you look inside of what programming exists in the systems. It's actually frighteningly small amount usually. And there are reasons for that. One, it's I don't want to make it too complex for the consumer. Two is I can guarantee that if I program a button that turns on the audio at this level and this playlist and adjusts the lights and adjusts the blinds, I guarantee next week I'm going to get a call that they want me to adjust it. And if I don't tell you it can do that, you never call me. They're happy because they got what they want, and I'm happy. But the customer didn't get the benefit of all the technology that's in the home, and that's where AI is really going to come into play, because it's going to take care of those things that you just you're not going to want to do, first of all. But secondly, you don't even know what they really want to use the technology for, because once again, as we talked about at the very beginning, when they move into the house for the first day, they don't know how they're going to use the space, really. They have ideas, but at the end of the day, it gets used mostly. In fact, most of the time, it's completely different than what they expected, how they were going to use that space. But if that can happen in an easy way for the consumer, where the integrator doesn't have to do that, it does two things. It simplifies your life, but it also makes sure that customer is having a really positive and personal experience with that solution, so they're more attuned to actually want more technology in their home because it's working towards what they want to achieve. And so I think that overall that this benefits that out. And I think the other thing you mentioned as well, which is incredibly important, and that's why I'm glad we have these events. That relationship between the builder and integrator is so critical. It's one of those things, there's trust that builder is trusting that integrator to come in and do the right amount of work and the right work, that they have a consumer that, once again, the day after it closes isn't calling them every day to complain about how things aren't working. They know they've got somebody there that's reliable, it's there. And that's why it's so critical, and that's why I think these events are critical to get those relationships set up and established.
Absolutely. Well, I'm grateful everyone attended today. Thank you so much, Paul and Angie. I always say one great thing about these summits is that you're with the experts, and I always call it the genius lane. You know, everyone's in their genius lane, and I really do think it's important for builders to lean in and utilize them as supports, resources, and to, like you said, have a good relationship with your integrator. There are great ones, and some aren't so great, so there's accredited ones. You can get recommendations for those who have are certified to do this type of work. And at the end, they should be making you look good. So,
Thank you all. Thank you.